Hello and welcome back to the Dicebreaker podcast. This is episode 36. Lolies isn't here this week, so we don't have a bingo call. But pick up sticks. That sounds like it could be.
It's
Branded wheels. That's brand bingo.
Oh no! Wheat slices.
That doesn't rhyme with six.
What?
Wheat slices.
I mean,
That sounds so terrible.
Isn't that just bread?
it's just a generic cereal. You know, absolutely no connection to any
Nobody's
brand.
buying wheat slices in a box.
You say that now.
We are joined by someone very special, though.
Yes,
in
we
Loli's absence, Matt.
We should do introductions before we immediately fly off the rails.
And talk about wheat slices.
Yeah, we're very honoured this week to be joined by Emma Partlow, our very first guest on the Dicebreaker podcast.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us.
No worries. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is doing okay on this cloudy and cold Tuesday.
It
Oh.
is, yeah.
Pretty clear.
Yeah, it's nice.
Oh,
today.
all right.
Very, very cloudy.
We can rub it in. Well, the weather's
Pretty
fine
lovely
here.
in Brighton.
Down by the sea.
Yes.
Mate, it's not. It's a rarity sometimes.
Yeah, we do get all of the rain, so we'll
Yeah.
worry
I-
about
The rain
yes.
of seagull poop.
Oh.
Yeah, and that.
Of course, I'm Matt Jarvis, returning. Alex Meehan, you're also here. Hello, Meehan. How
Yeah.
are you doing? Well, everyone else is not important anymore. We've got a guest.
The way that Matt says that truly reflects the tiredness in his soul, having to deal with me every day. So, yeah, I'll take it. Yeah,
Instead
I'm
of
all
good
right.
morning, it's just, you again.
It's like, oh no, what do I have to try and do to control you now?
So,
and the other problem child.
Hello.
hello, Wales. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking.
Good.
I am a lot more tired than I thought I'd be today, considering I had about 12 hours sleep. But there we
Wow.
go. Maybe I overslept. Who knows?
That can happen.
We are, of course, here to talk about the week's board game and tabletop news, and also answer some of your emails. But before we do that, as always, we're diving in with what we've been playing this week. Let's start with our guest. Emma, what have you been playing lately?
So unsurprisingly, I've been playing some Magic the Gathering. I've been playing a lot of Commander this weekend, just gone. Also, I've been playing a lot of Tekken Oko, because pandas are great, and I just love the games.
Pandas are
They are really great.
They need help though. They need as much help as they can
Yes.
get.
I want to play the
Before-
expansion at some point, because apparently you can have like a female panda now, and there's this looks really cool. And besides that, I've been reading the new Death Guard Codex because that just came out, so I'm trying to clean myself up on all the rules for when I can actually play an actual game again.
I cannot believe how long it's been since I've played an actual miniatures.
I know, it's so sad. Like we can play Magic, but you have to play it on like webcam, and then you just set up your table, and it fills the gap, but it's just not quite the same at the same time. So
Is that how? I guess is that because you've got a collection, like a physical collection, rather than hopping on Arena?
yeah, so especially when it comes to stuff like Commander, so that's like a singleton format that's really, really popular at the moment. A lot of people just have collections and they can't afford to play it on like Magic Online, for example. So they just get a webcam, do it top down, and then just play against other people across the world. It's really, really cool how they've adapted, but at the same time, it's not quite the same than playing against someone who's right opposite you. So.
I imagine there must be some kind of cheat where if you have like a really bad webcam on purpose, you'd be like, oh yeah, I just put this down.
Yeah,
Sure.
you can.
Yeah, no, it's that one.
Yeah, you could shuffle your deck incorrectly, I guess, as well. And it's a lot.
Or you just get MS Paint up
Yeah.
and just draw images of the cards that you want them to see.
There's the Alex Meehan avenue.
That sounds great.
Always MS Paint.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a cultural institution. Come on. You know, also, I don't know how to really play Magic, aside from the very basics. I tried Arena, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Is Legends a new format?
So Magic Legends is their take on a MOBA. So it's very similar to like an MMO style World of Warcraft kind of thing that it's not out yet, so it's in its alpha, so it's still being really tested. But they really, really want to push the online MMO aspect because they've seen how well WoW does. So they're like, you know what, we're going to do the same thing and do one for Magic the Gathering. So I've not heard great things about it, to be honest, because it just sounds really rough around the edges. But we'll have to see what happens.
I mean, I know WoW is still relatively popular.
We just had a new update
kind of
as
feel
well.
like...
Just had a new update as well. We had Shadowlands not too long ago. So.
Yeah, I'm aware of this, but I just feel like whenever any company tries to push an MMO that's a similar sort of style, I mean, like Magic's been around for ages, obviously, and it has its own kind of distinct style-ish, but a lot of the stuff is still based around like fantasy, you know, and World of Warcraft. I just feel like really operates in that area.
Yeah.
So I've seen MMOs kind of come in and be like, oh, look, what World of Warcraft's making money, we can make money as well.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, they're making money because everyone's playing World of Warcraft.
They're like, why should I play this when I could just play the best version, which is World of Warcraft? So
Exactly.
So
you know, best of luck to them.
yeah, absolutely. Have to see what happens, but I'm not confident on it just for that reason, because there's a lot of Magic players that still play WoW and they've been playing since, you know, the day one. So have to see what happens.
Yeah, it does go to show how little some of us know about Magic, and the fact that we thought MMO was a format for the game.
To be fair,
I have seen booster packs with the word legend.
Commander Legends is what you're
well,
thinking
you've got Commander Legends, and then there was a Magic set called Legends, which was about 20 years ago. So there's a lot of similar sounding, you know, names and overlap. But yeah, because there's so many new formats to Magic now that, you know, it's a safe assumption to go, oh, it must be a new format, whereas actually it's a digital game.
Yeah, no, I wasn't making fun of you, Mr.
No.
Uri. I know nothing about Magic
Oh,
either.
I know what's going on here.
I haven't even heard of Legends.
I'll be honest. I think I was thinking of Commander Legends because I had no idea there was an MMO coming out.
I think
Neither did I, mate.
they've only got
Neither
like
did I.
6 adjectives and they just rearrange
Yeah.
it. Battle, Legends, War,
Yeah.
something else. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say I love the idea of an MMO where you're sent to collect 20 flowers, and to pick a flower you have to play a full game of Magic. And 17 hours later you've picked those 20 flowers.
Oh,
We were talking on Slack because Johnny told us about Combat Chess, which was a mini game in one of the Mortal Kombat games where you played chess with characters from Mortal Kombat, and then every time two pieces met, you would have a Mortal Kombat fight. So I wonder if there is a market for you play an MMO, but every small action requires you to play a card game.
that would
Emma,
take.
am I right in thinking there's a card that is banned where you play it and then you play a mini game of
Yeah.
Magic?
Yeah, it's called Shahrazad. It's a super old card, but yeah, it basically when you play another game within a game. But yeah, it got banned a long time ago because
I wonder
there's
why.
a lot of
Yeah.
it was that, and there was a lot of gambling connotations as well, and Wizards were very, very strict on that as well. But yeah, there's a mini game card for that, like that's very similar. But yeah.
All right,
I guess when it's like Magic is almost like The Simpsons in that it's been going for so long that they're gonna just retread ideas
Yeah.
after a while. I think. Yeah.
All right, excellent. Emma, have you been playing anything else, or is that?
That's pretty much it at the moment, unfortunately. Just reading up on Warhammer 40k stuff because there's just a load of stuff coming out, and I play Death Guard, so there's a lot of like new rules updates and so forth. So I'm just trying to keep on top of that.
All right, excellent. Let's move over to Michael Wheel and Wills. What have you been playing lately?
I, for once, have actually played some board games.
On this podcast.
Every time I come on this podcast, I'm like, oh, I don't know, I haven't played really anything. But I played a 2-player classic, Odin's Ravens, which is very highly regarded. I can see why, because it's very, very good fun. It's super simple. It's basically, for those who haven't heard of it, you are playing as Odin's 2 ravens, and they're having a race around the world. So one's going in one direction, one's going in the other direction, and then whoever meets back at the start point first wins.
Is that mayhaps Hugin and Mugen?
Hugging and mugging.
Yeah.
So Hugging and Mugging are going around the world. So you basically lay out, I think it's like 16 cards, which are sort of double-sided, and they have essentially like biomes on them. So you got like a forest and a desert and a river or whatever. And you draw cards to like lay yourselves onto those spaces. So you play the suit of the next space basically as a card from your hand, and you get to move your character forward. If you've got like a run of 3 forests, you can play 1 forest to go all over them. And then you've also got like these Loki cards, which are kind of like trickster cards, which is where like most of the strategic element of the game comes from, because you can keep cycling through your land cards as many times as you want, and you can keep shuffling the deck and redrawing until the game ends, but you have a finite amount of Loki cards that's identical to your opponent. So you have things where like you can flip cards around and you can rotate things on the board. You have ones where you can like take a new land card and make a loop, which I'm trying to like use my hands, but you can't see me, and anyone listening to this can't see me. But imagine like a straight line has then just had a big old bend shoved into it and then right back onto the straight line. So they basically have to, go a further path. But the really interesting thing about it is like it encourages you to screw around with your opponent. But because of the way the board works, it's kind of like backgammon. You have to start from opposite ends, but then end up on each other's starting spaces. So any way in which you've screwed over the opponent at the start of the game, you then have to go through yourself, which is really, really cool. So you kind of have to like weigh up, when should I use these? Should I use them to benefit myself, or should I try and screw the other person over? But then I need to be careful in case I screw myself over in the long run, which is really good fun. It's very pressy as well.
Wheels, do any of the Loki cards cause Tom Hiddleston's version of Loki to sort of just appear in front of you?
Shirtless.
I mean, you don't own the game, so I can only assume that no, that is not.
That's the expansion. You pay extra for that.
I would pay
Maybe
any
the
amount of
collector's
money for that.
I was an exclusive Kickstarter backer, I think, who got that special version. It's just Tom, just packaged in the box.
Whoa!
If you say so, Wills.
I also played Black Orchestra, which is a co-op game in which you try and kill Hitler, which is basically... but it's kind of...
Right.
Meehan's a big fan.
Oh, I love it.
I love killing Hitler, mate. But it's basically like you kind of have like this map of Germany and then the bits of the countries aside that were sort of invaded during World War II. But you're playing as like members of the cabinet who actually, like, there was a group of people who tried to assassinate Hitler from within the country, which I had no idea about, which was really interesting. And then like there's loads of characters you can pick from to play as, and they all have like a little blurb of like, hey, here's who this person is. I was playing as someone who like attached a bomb to the underside of a meeting table in the room that Hitler was in, and then still failed to kill him somehow. But yeah, it's ridiculous, like some of the stories that come out of it, and like just it's that part of history that you don't really think about, because a lot of the time, especially I think in a lot of like World War II themed games, a lot of the time they're focused on like moving tanks and troops around, and it's all very like battle lines and stuff like that. You don't see a lot of the sort of internal politics of the countries that were involved, kind of thing. And to see, seeing the inner workings of what was essentially the antagonist nation of the time period was really, really interesting. But it's quite sort of, it reminds me of like a sort of like espionage kind of theme where you're desperately walking around trying to do things, but also you have like a suspicion, because at any point you can draw a card that says Gestapo raid. At which point it's like, if you are a certain level of suspicion, you literally go to prison and have to be broken out. And you lose all like your contraband and stuff like that. So it's really interesting, and it was sort of like viewing a kind of, I think, a bit of a tired theme in board games, but from a new angle.
Is this the game that has the card when you win and it says "Congratulations, you killed Hitler"? And that's
it does.
Yeah, okay.
And then it's like, post a selfie on Twitter.
That's the one. Yes, that's the one.
I don't know if I want to do that. But we did kill Hitler. Me and my partner killed Hitler. So you're welcome, world.
Great job.
And then I played a tiny bit of Magic Arena, actually, which I think my partner was playing it for some reason, and I was like, oh, I'll come and help, because I think they were getting confused by something. I was like, I have a tangential knowledge of how Magic works, so I'm going to come over and help. And I had a pretty good time with it. It was a pretty fleeting moment, but yeah, it's pretty good.
All right. Alex, Meehan, let's move over to you. What have you been playing this week?
Oh, Mr. Jarvis. What did we play together?
We played Root.
Yeah, we played Root again.
You can probably tell by the difference in our voices who won this game of Root.
I was about to say that the Google Doc, which is laid out in front of us, says a lot of Root.
Yeah. I mean, I've not just been playing with Matt, I've been playing with other people as well. But yeah, no, Matt and I played a game together, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I was robbed.
You absolutely were. It was quite savage towards the end.
Yeah, it was savage, Mr. Jobbers. Thank you very much. I'm glad you admitted that.
It wasn't just me, I'd like to point out.
No, it wasn't just you. It was everyone else as well. I was playing the Uri, who I've played a few times before. It was random select, and the game was like, yeah, you need to do this again. I was like, oh, okay, fair enough. But I was actually doing really well this time. Because I figured out one of the big things with the Uri, one of the factions in the game, is it really helps to expand like as early as possible. So like put your roost down as fast as you can in the first few rounds, because it takes away a lot of the heavy lifting, where later on people start smelling a rat, as it were, or a bird in this case, and start going after you, but you've already established yourself somewhat, so it means that maybe some losses aren't so bad as if it would be if you only had few roosts. So I kind of went massive expansion, set down as many roosts as possible, and then obviously people started cottoning on to the fact that I was winning. That's when it went downhill. Because one of my friends was like, "Oh, look over there," to me, and I was ganged up on.
You fell for the classic trap, Meehan. You
What?
should never be the first person to start winning a strategy game.
Well,
Because they never win in the end.
the thing is, the Uri get a certain amount of points at the end of their turn. It's not like I could slow things down a bit and then creep back up. Like, once you start getting those points, that's what you get. So of course I was getting past 20 points, and everyone was like, "Oh, quick, we need to all pile on," and then that meant Matt just walked over the finish line whistling to himself, holding his bindle.
Yeah, you were about 15 points ahead, or 10 to 15 points ahead for a good long time.
Yep.
You were getting about 4 victory points at the end of every turn.
Yep.
And we were all kind of just floundering around. And then, your friend pointed this out, and within the space of a single round, you went from having half the map covered in roost to having no roost at all and getting 0 victory points.
Yes, they're very good at that.
It
My
was,
friend. They like doing that. They're like, "Oh, look, Alex is doing things over there," and then my other friend will be like, "Oh yeah, you're right. Actually, they are doing something." And then I'm like, "Oh, okay, here we go." And you know what? It was the closest game of Root I've ever had. Like, any of us could have won in the space of a single turn. Like, at that point. And it got to one point where the same friend who, implied the others should pile onto my poor birds, also started saying things to Matt, suggesting ways that he could win.
the worm tongue in my ear.
Honestly, I had to tell him to stop.
I mean,
because I was like, "Stop this chicanery. You are not helping Matt win."
I was genuinely tensed up in the last turn because I knew I had to win that turn, or somebody else would.
Yeah.
And I managed to score 7 victory points in the space of a turn as the vagabond.
Oh my lord!
I think it was the thing. It's like I was the vagabond, so I was just kind of
Moseying around.
Yeah, basically for most of it, just happily trading with people, and then Meehan got a little bit too far ahead. I was like, okay, it's time for go, and just immediately crossbowed one of her warriors. And
I gave you that
burnt down a
crossbow
roost.
as well.
Yeah, I know. I traded for it and then immediately, literally just shot you back with it.
Top 10 anime betrayals.
Yeah, it was. And then I fought a bear or wrestled a bear, whatever the 4 victory point card is, the
God.
quest for the vagabond.
Yeah, and then you were sat there for a bit going, "Oh, I don't know what I'm going to do to get."
I did
these
apologise
last
at the
points."
time as well because I felt genuinely bad.
It's fine. I can survive.
Oh well, I
But,
still did it. I still won.
Oh yeah, you still did it. But no, Matt was sat there going, I don't know how I'm going to get the last of these points. And then my friend was like, oh, there is something you can do. Wink, wink, wink. And I was just sitting there slowly puffing up in rage. But no, it was a really good match. Yeah, I played another game sort of before that with the same group, but not with Matt. And we figured out that the Woodland Alliance are one of the most OP groups in the entire game.
To be fair, I think the Woodlands Alliance are the most OP group because nobody expects them to win every time.
Yeah, they're just building up sympathy.
Yeah,
and
if
then
nobody ever believes in you, then you're golden. Because as soon as someone's like, oh, they could win, then you're screwed.
Yeah, I think we figured out. So Root's a really interesting game. In fact, the more you play it, the more you kind of work out how things operate. And we kind of worked out that the Woodland Alliance is one of those things that if you have to start, if you want to stand any chance against it, you just have to crush it, like from whatever opportunities you can. Because there are some things that faction can do, and it boggles the mind. I played as the Woodland Alliance, and I wiped the board somehow. And that was the first time I played as them. It was wild. I felt kind of bad, to be honest. It's why I wanted a good, honest win, and I couldn't get that. Stolen from me. Other than Root, we played Parks with the Nightfall expansion. So I've spoken about Parks on the podcast before. Really lovely, sweet game that's just quite laid back, like worker placement. But there's an expansion for it called Nightfall, which adds some new park cards, but also a new mechanic in the form of campsites, which you can place along the trail that you travel along. And instead of doing the usual thing that you would on the trail, you go to like a campsite location, and it offers you just a new action that you can take instead of the normal one. And you can also buy more year cards as well, which act as like game goals that allow you to get more points. So you can kind of rack up year cards that stack on top of one another, which is really interesting. It doesn't change the game massively. It's not like a really impressive expansion, but it's nice. Like, it adds some new elements to it. We enjoyed playing with it. So there you go. I lost by 2 points. Not my week, is it?
Yeah, running theme, losing by 2 points.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Rub it in, Matt. Don't worry. Yeah.
I will. Yeah.
This is his way of getting back at me for all the stuff I pull. That's what I've played, Mr. Jarvis.
All right, excellent. I have not played very much other than Root, but I did look at Mausritter, which is a game we chatted about on the podcast a couple of weeks back, and I ended up buying the starter box set, and it arrived, and it is such a lovely little game. It's a role-playing game about being mice. And the rulebook itself, on the front cover, it has a little cutout of a door, and it goes through to the first page, and the first page has a little mouse on it, so you can just open it and it pops out of the door. But the whole set is just a really lovely looking kind of collection of bits. So there's an adventure in there, there's a GM screen, there's some tokens which you use for equipping items, because the mechanics, your equip load is essentially squares on your character sheet. So you fill them up with items, and that's it. And I think you roll 1d6 to resolve things. But it's just a lovely set. I believe Isaac Williams, I might be getting that name wrong, but the designer who created it is also the artist for it. It's just kind of a one-person creation, but it's just a lovely, lovely little set. So I'm very much looking forward to playing it. Although, unfortunately, I think because of the item system, it might be quite hard to play over webcam, so it might be a little while before I play it. But until then, I can look at the book and go, "Oh, isn't it nice?"
One day.
Yeah, it's so. I just was opening the flap again and again, like mouse, 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 mouse. It's so sweet.
Sounds like.
I imagine your partner just standing there, just like. Yeah. Okay.
It sounds like you and Emma have been kindred spirits this week, just sort of like wistfully looking at nice books for games you can't play.
There's definitely an element of that. But yeah, it's a lovely little thing. I think you can download a digital version of it, and you can get the rulebook by itself. But I sprung for the box set. Thank you, half a bottle of wine on a Friday night, for aiding me in that decision. Going, that's lovely. It's been a hard year. Yeah, okay.
There's that little voice going, "You should do it, man."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yes, that's all I haven't been playing in addition to actually playing Root. All right, let's roll on to some news headlines. We have, first up, this one written up by our lovely news writer Chase. The UK government, or SAGE, which stands for the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, put out some revised safety information around the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, hope everyone out there is staying safe and healthy, looking after yourselves. But in the latest advice, in the lead up to Christmas and the holidays, they advised people not to play board games. They identified it as a high-risk activity. Relating to fomites, which are essentially the particles you don't want. And they said that being close to people, as you often are with board games, and passing around kind of shared components, had a higher risk of transmission. So they suggested, instead of playing board games, replacing them with something like a quiz, which doesn't quite equate.
Thanks.
Not the same.
Yeah, cheers.
Sounds like the general advice should just be, maybe we didn't need Christmas this year.
Yeah.
I mean, because they aren't aware that the internet is a place where you can play board games on. Because presumably it's run by people who are like, just say do a quiz. Like that'll do.
Just, I guess not a pub quiz, because that seems.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. I mean, yeah. But there are plenty of ways to play board games and RPGs online. So, keep doing that.
And like you say, whether it's using something like Tabletop Simulator or the digital version, or as Emma was doing, playing Magic with webcam, like there are so many ways around it. Like, unless you are playing, I don't know, a game that it literally involves passing things directly between you, or, nobody's playing Happy Salmon anytime soon.
Sad time.
Which is a crime.
It is. But, there are plenty of other games that work just fine over a webcam in the meantime. So, yes, stay safe out there, folks. But maybe don't get together in a room for multiple hours on end. You can wait.
You can play board. No one's saying you can't play board games.
It's got to be sensible.
Yeah. Don't be an idiot.
Yeah.
That's what they should have just put in 72-point font.
In general, like if you sat down for Christmas and you think, I want to play a board game, put on one hand the death of innocent people, and the other hand a mediocre game of Trivial Pursuit, and just like weigh up which one you think you would rather avoid.
All right.
Nice
moving on. Alex Meehan, you wrote this story after speaking with Dungeons and Dragons. What's the latest?
I spoke with Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes, you spoke with both Dungeons and Dragons. Yes.
Yeah, I spoke with the entity known as Dungeons and Dragons, and it came back to me, and it was kind of what I expected. So to cut a long story short, Chase, our lovely news writer, wrote a news piece about the reactions that people have been having to the recent source book, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which came out last month. And within the source book, there's a very specific sort of section where you can create characters that ignore racial traits. Essentially, you can make a background for your character. You can choose a species for your character to be, but they don't take on like the plus or minus traits or the abilities that usually would come with those species selections. And this, so in the article I wrote, where I talked to Jeremy Crawford, who is a lead designer for D&D, and specifically on Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, he said that this decision to put these, this choice in is specifically a response to people's rightful criticisms of D&D's depiction of certain species as equated to certain races, and it's not good, essentially. And so people's general reaction to this is, is this your solution to this problem? It doesn't really. The problem is that it doesn't really address directly a lot of the issues in terms of the way that these cultures are depicted in relation to, long-term issues with those races, like orcs and like drow and such. It just says, you can ignore that if you want. Gee, thanks, D&D. It's actually interesting. In the interview I did with Crawford, he actually talked about how, like, with moral alignments, for example, being attached to certain species, that is now being changed to basically that doesn't happen anymore. That doesn't exist. So, for example, in Rhymer the Frost Maiden, the new adventure, the Goliath race that's introduced doesn't have a moral alignment. They're kind of scrubbing that. Before, they would put in the various books, oh, you could ignore moral alignment if you want, but still put it in there. Now they're just scrapping that entirely. I'm just like, why don't you do that with this? Like, he talked about how the problem being sometimes they try to straddle the line between keeping these traditional elements and trying to, provide a better depiction of, the different species and races and such, and how that just wasn't possible, and now they're just trying to do essentially like a solid, okay, this is how we're doing it, but they won't do that with this. Like, they're still trying to straddle that line.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of the disappointment was that it is on paper it's a movement in the right direction, but it's such a small incremental. I think so. For full disclosure, I haven't seen the book myself, but I believe it's 2 pages tops, something like that. It's not, I think people were expecting a much more kind of prominent way of addressing it, like you say, and some folks who have been displeased have kind of compared it to, I think, I can't remember the name of the specific rule, but like I say, essentially just ignoring it rather than actually directly combating it.
Zero.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, it's like I say, it's a move in the right direction, but it's such a small kind of baby step that I can see why people are disappointed, because it just feels like they're towing the water. Yeah,
it just feels frustrating. Like, they can do more, but they choose not to. This happens a lot in Magic the Gathering as well. It took a long while for Wizards to they were properly dragging their heels to deal with like racial nuances in the game. And finally they're there, but it took so long to get there. I expect D&D to be similar, unfortunately. It's not like they're incapable of doing it. It's just, I don't know, just stuck in their ways perhaps, and it just takes a long time just to process all this and redesign everything, because at least when it comes to Magic, there's Magic in terms of design works 2-3 years ahead of the current timeline. So right now they're working on stuff 2-3 years ahead, and that could be the same for D&D. So a lot of the stuff that comes out is old to them but doesn't address the current issues, if that makes sense. There's a weird time disparity.
I mean, the issues in D&D have been long, sort of there. They've had plenty of opportunities to address it. I think the main issue is that they're so worried about upsetting people who are so used to doing things in a certain way, while still looking like they're trying to do something, that it's kind of like, well, they've come out with this sort of compromise. But, you know, the problem is that D&D is the most popular, you know, RPG out there. Like, it shouldn't be towing the line. It should be, you know, innovating itself. Like, it should be a forerunner in improving the way that, you know, racial issues are addressed and you know, improved. Obviously, speaking as someone who is white, like, I would recommend people go and read, you know, some of the blogs where people have talked about this and their disappointment. So Graham Barber is one of the writers referenced by Chase's article, along with, like, there's obviously lots of people talking about it on Twitter and such. But yeah, just talking to the lead designer, you know, Crawford, like, you know, he said it could take years for these improvements to kind of go through, and you're like, obviously I couldn't get a huge amount of details about, you know, their plans, because it's Wizards of the Coast, you know, they don't want to just disclose anything. Obviously they're aware of the problem, but, you know, when, for example, when I asked, you know, how available are these options going to be, you know, you can get them obviously in Tasha's Cauldron and everything. They're on D&D Beyond, and if you're part of the Adventurers League, you can get them there, but, like, they're not making them, as far as I know, they're not making them available beyond those options. Obviously, someone will probably pirate them somewhere or whatever, but, like, you'd think that if they were really committed to this, they would make them more widely available. And there's no word of whether they're going to replace the current system that you see in, like, the big books like Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide. And the problem is that most people buy those books. Like, those are the books that people buy and look at, not Tasha's Cauldron or everything. So it's kind of like, okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, you know, like Emma said, the pipeline on products like this, especially in the case of Wizards, like, they are so far in advance because there are so many aspects of, like, you know, like printing and localization and all those kind of things. Whereas Wizards, I think, like to see themselves almost like a video game company where they are running like a sort of games as a service kind of model, where it's like, oh, we're going to have new content coming out all the time. But, like, when you ask them to do something this fundamental as a change, that's when they trip over themselves, because it's like, well, okay, that means we need to put out an entirely new edition of the game.
Yeah. Which isn't happening, by the way. That's been confirmed. Like,
yeah.
When I asked, is there going to be a new edition, I was told, no plans for that.
Yeah, but then you look at some of the, so you can afford them, I guess, some kind of you know, timing issues on that. But then you look at the way that they deliver most of their content with D&D, where a lot of it is just available digitally, where, you know, it is a case of swapping over some PDFs in a very layman's way of putting it, and it does seem to sort of like crumble away a bit. And it's, you know, it's all well and good to say, oh, well, you know, we work on things so far in advance that it's difficult for us to make these changes. It's like, okay, cool, but you should have been making these changes in the first place. It shouldn't have taken a massive public campaign for you to be thinking about these things.
Plus, WotC are in a position where they can just errata stuff on the fly. Granted, this doesn't look very good when you pick up a manual and go, oh, these are the rules, and then you look online and then the rules have changed. They are able to change the rules if they wanted to. It's just they clearly don't want to.
Yeah.
I mean, that they're obviously still invested in, like, the physical editions of source books and rule books and such, because, you know, for example, there's a collector's edition of Tasha's Cauldron and everything. So, like, that's a thing that you can get physically. that will cost you more that they're releasing. Like, there's obviously still an investment involved in the physical market, but it still feels like they could be doing more, and they're just deciding, well, as long as we do enough to make us look like we're doing something in response,
yeah,
then
it's
that's enough.
like the statement where they addressed it over the summer, I thought was actually, it was pretty direct, and some of the steps they took with Magic to ban some of the cards, again, long overdue, given those cards came out in 93, I think they were like right from the first, and they were pretty explicitly, racist. Like they were pretty upfront with calling them racist. I think, part of the other issue, and this is all, it's all alleged, but there have been alleged stories of writers of colour and so on, just not having a good time working on D&D, and so it feels like in some ways those structures aren't there to support that as well. So you hope it will move in the right direction, and you can never know all this stuff. It's frustrating for it to be such a points 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or such a small movement in a direction. And like I say, it just feels like this is the biggest RPG in the world. Loads of people play it. It is, it's not our favorite RPG, I don't think.
No.
But it is such a huge thing. It's a kind of culture institution. You would hope that it would be leading the way with this stuff, like I say. And it just feels like so often they are indebted at points to a legacy of a game that, if those people are like happy with straight up racist stereotypes, that's probably not who you want playing your game. Like, just ditch them off. They probably aren't going to care if you put out a new book anyway, because they'll be playing, 2nd edition or something. Like, at some point,
I do think half of it is, and I'm going to be a little bit blunt again, this is coming from a Magic background, is that WotC don't really care as long as they make money, because they're owned by a company that wants to make loads of money, and that's Hasbro. I think a lot of it skews on that axis, unfortunately. Again, the way I see it is, I want to be proven wrong. Please prove me wrong. I'm more than happy to, but I'll see it until I believe it.
Well, yeah, I think the case in point, the fact that the center of this controversy is the fact that, oh hey, we've made some very, very small changes, and you can buy them in this $30 book. Like it's not, if you had a big horrible race issue in a video game and they said, oh, we fix it in a DLC, you can't do that. That is just not all right. And at that point it just becomes a bit like,
really,
a bit easy to see the true motivations.
Like, besides the changes, I don't even call them changes, right? The options that have been provided, like, regardless of their merit. Like, for me, when I was talking with Crawford, I think the thing that concerned me the most was, like, how available are these options? Like, oh, okay, you can join the Adventurers League and then you can get them, or you have to pay for this separate sourcebook. And that's the thing that really concerned me. It's like, these sourcebooks that most people already have or are going to be buying are probably going to be the Player's Handbook or the Dungeon Master's Guide. Like, these extra sourcebooks, I don't know the numbers, I don't know how well they do, but, like, they're not, I severely doubt they're some of the more best-selling ones, especially something like Tasha's Cauldron, which is not even, like, essentially, to describe it, it's a collection of things that you can add to your game, like new subclasses or spells or things like that. They're not like Eberron, for example, Rising from the Last War, which is a new setting. I would say that source books with settings are probably even more popular than something like Tasha's Cauldron or everything. So it kind of feels like, okay, you've made this option, but you've put it in a source book that isn't really hugely fundamental to the game, and you have to pay extra for it.
Yeah.
If they wanted to even do things a bit better, they would just make them available on their website.
Yeah.
And like make that really obvious. Say, hey, you can find these on our website. I mean, how much is that going to put them out of? Like,
well, they did that before when, like, at one point D&D started to cross over into Magic and use Magic planes and Magic setting so you can play D&D in them. And for a while, they just made them free PDFs on their website. They didn't charge for them at all. It was just like 20 pages of reference material and classes that you could use. But now they put it in a book and charge you $30 for it. It's just It's just a shame.
Yeah.
Wah, wah.
It's far from perfect, but I do think Pathfinder is like a good example of taking those steps and actually kind of sticking with them. Like it's kind of interesting to see the two diverge even further.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of Pathfinder. I haven't played 2e. I've only played the first edition. But the fact that a major sourcebook they announced this year take huge influences from African cultures, and it looks really impressive and amazing. Okay, bravo.
Yeah, in a way that appears to be, in line with consultants and rather than just appropriating that content. Yeah, but yes, hopefully D&D gets its stuff together.
And look, if it doesn't, there are so many other.
Well, play something else.
We say this every week, but find something else.
Also,
to play. If it's really irking you, at some point you need to stop beating a dead horse and find something a little bit more appropriate.
I'd say one of the really good things coming out of the story is the fact that a lot of people talking about, being disappointed with these options, they pointed towards homebrew stuff that people have made for D&D that solve this problem. So go and find that stuff, because there's some really wonderful content creators doing that.
If you are married to D&D, for the love of God, don't buy Tasha's card and everything. Look up the hundreds and hundreds of custom modded pieces of content from people of color creators who have actually made inroads to making this a little bit more manageable, because it's free and it's more authentic, and you're not paying for the privilege of a game that should be fixed on its own merits. So there you go.
Speaking of good RPGs, to segue out of the serious conversation, Quest, which is an RPG, if you've listened to any of this podcast or literally seen anything we've written or spoken about on camera in the last year, we all love Quest. And the creators of Quest are now making a spin-off card game called Queens, which I'm just going to note, I hope that they stick with this thing and every game they release from now on begins with a Q, because how many more can they do before they get into some real...
Who's the designer who does everything starts with, is it F? Something like that?
I wish Lolis was here. Fredimund Freeze?
Fredimund Freeze, yeah. Something like that.
Designer of Power Grid, which has a name in German that begins with F, and Friday, and is always green. It's always green and it always starts with F. But yes, the creators of Quest, the Adventure Guild, and designer TC Sotek. Queens is a competitive card game. The interesting thing about it is it exists in the universe of Quest, as well as being an actual card game. There's not loads of details on it yet. Chase managed to dig up some details directly from TC Sotek. But you essentially have a grid of cards and you're trying to reveal your opponent's queens while keeping your own hidden. But yeah, I always find it fascinating when it's like, this game exists in the universe, but also you can play it. I think off the back of things like Orlog, which we chatted about last week, games that are designed to exist in the world that's not our own. How do they do that, or does it just end up feeling a bit like blackjack, but you've put a picture of a space alien on the cards?
That reminds you of, what was that game that came out this year, Matt?
That's vague. That's a...
Oh yeah, you're right, a game did come out this year, Meehan.
Are you thinking of Tailstones?
Yeah, I'm talking about Tailstones. Yeah, this reminded me of Tailstones, and I was like, oh, this sounds good. Unlike Tailstones.
Like I said, there's not loads of details about it. There's a few that Chase dug up that you can read on the website, but it'll be hitting Kickstarter next year sometime. Alongside, they're doing a science fantasy version of Quest as well. So it feels like they're really building it out. And they've, from what I know, they've done a really nice job of just opening up that game so that like homebrewing it is really easy, kind of putting your own content in it. Because there's not a load of game to begin with. That's kind of the nice thing about it, but they just allow people to build it off in their own directions. So yeah, that's Queens, and it will be on Kickstarter some point next year. Let's shift on to this next one. Has anyone played Block Mania?
Nope.
Me neither, but it's in the news, so here we are. Block Mania is a game from the 80s, originally published by Games Workshop, set in the universe of 2000 AD. What is the universe of Judge Dredd and that? Judge Dredd and Strontium Dog, and
What the hell is that?
that's another 2000 AD comic strip.
Oh, of course. Strontium.
Of course, yes.
gosh.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no.
There can be so many upset comments on this video.
So yeah, Block Mania this is set in Judge Dredd, so it's mega cities, and the premise of it, despite having never played it, the premise sounds hilarious because it's essentially the inhabitants of a block of flats or an apartment block basically want to destroy their neighbours who are also in a block of flats. So you have these two kind of opposing towers, and you're trying to just wreak havoc on each other. And that's the game. So you can pull off dirty tricks, and you can kind of blow up things and all sorts. It was apparently designed by Richard Halliwell, who did Space Hulk.
Oh, okay.
So it kind of really comes from that 80s Games Workshop run of Fury of Dracula and Space Hulk and all sorts.
What is Space Hulk?
Space Hulk is like a dungeon crawler.
Space Hulk is basically Aliens, but in 40k, isn't
Pretty
it?
much.
More fascists.
Yeah.
It was also a PC
More
game once
fascist.
upon a time as well. It was
Sorry?
also a first-person PC game at one point as well.
Yeah, I think there's also a tactical like RTS or turn-based version
you have,
as well. Like
you have
it's,
Dawn of War as well, which is another one.
Yeah.
Which is based off as well.
I think there's just been like 4 million Warhammer games. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah, they're just giving that license out to anyone that wants it, really. But yes, this re-release of Block Mania, which sounds like a kid's Lego game, was it? Like a kid's Lego knockoff. It's a re-release of the original, so they're very much going for nostalgia value. Obviously, we saw Hero Quest lately, but it's a recreation of the original. They're also putting out one of the expansions that I think increases the player count, called Happy Hour, Block Mania Happy Hour. Just a collection of
What a
words
name.
at some point, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Presumably you're just flinging liquor bottles at the end of the flat.
Shouting cursives. just
Yeah.
But it's being republished by Rebellion Unplugged, which is owned by 2000 AD. So a spin-off of the Sniper Elite video game publisher, who also did the Sniper Elite board game.
I've heard good things about that game, so
Yeah. So yeah, I believe it's already on sale. I don't know if it's only available for a limited amount of time. I was scanning through the story. It doesn't mention that. So it might be that there's just a limited amount available. But apparently it's out. So you can go and grab it if you're so intrigued. Last on the news block this week,
This one's very.
which I cut a few news stories because we spent a while discussing D&D because it was quite important, but I couldn't cut this one, which is that Uri Geller, noted spoonbender and illusionist. Well, that's what people think of when they think of Uri Geller, right? Is bending spoons.
I don't think
and
of anything when I think of Uri Geller, to be honest. That's why this story
not
caught me
thought
out
of
so
Uri
much.
Geller in a long time, but apparently Uri Geller 20 years ago had a major issue with the Pokemon card game, specifically Kadabra, which is a psychic Pokemon of the Abracadabra Alakazam line. So Kadabra, for those not up on their Pokemon, is a psychic Pokemon who wields spoons, and in the Japanese is known as Yugura.
Youngler.
Oh, Yungura, yes. Thank you. So yeah, so Geller apparently 20 years ago didn't like this when Pokemon first came out because he thought it was, essentially taking his identity and turning it into a fictional monster. So he sued Nintendo for $60 million at the end of November 2000. And because of that legal battle, Kadabra didn't appear in the Pokemon card game or the anime for 20 years, which I didn't realise because Kadabra continued to be in the video games and Pokemon Go. So did they just think Uri Geller, he's completely offline, he'll never see this, just tuck it away?
you won't check the game.
Yeah, just tuck it away in the biggest mobile game of the last 10 years. That'll be fine. So yeah, he posted a tweet. This is Uri Geller, who said, I'm truly sorry for what I did 20 years ago. Kids and grown-ups, I'm releasing the ban.
Some kind of tragedy by his hand.
Goodness, finally, the world. We live in a better world now. Finally, the ban has been released.
Best news of 2020.
We needed something, and Uri Geller finally delivered. It's now all up to Nintendo to bring my Kadabra Pokemon card back. It will probably be one of the rarest cards now. Much energy and love to all.
I wonder why he's brought this up now, 20 years after the incident, when he's not remembered by anyone.
We actually went and looked up Kadabra as a Pokemon card, because I think there's less than a handful of different versions because it was banned, or it just stopped appearing relatively quickly after it was published. And typically they go for about 40 cents. Somewhere between 40 cents and $1.
I was not expecting the cents.
Yeah, so there's a near mint Kadabra on PokemonPrices.com for 40 cents. So, I guess that's...
Cheers, Yuri.
Yeah.
But Matt, it's very important. I feel like we should state this. Geller says himself, "Bless you all. I'm Pokemon. Kadabra is free."
Yeah, so he posted a video that was him like opening a briefcase full of Kadabra merchandise, like almost like it was this like time capsule that just like he had taken it upon himself to lock away every instance of Kadabra in the world, apart from, in the video games and Pokemon Go, because you can't lock away code, I guess. So he just opens up this suitcase full of Kadabras, and apparently one Alakazam, which he mistook for a Kadabra.
How dare he? That's not his brand.
So yeah, he said he was cracking the lid for the first time in 20 years, and it's just a suitcase full of Kadabras, as you do.
2020 does not surprise me anymore. I've seen everything.
No, there's just nothing they can pull, is there? There's like an excerpt from also like in that video where he's like opening the suitcase. Behind him is a car that is covered in bent cutlery.
Oh yeah.
Just like, who is this man? But apparently, like in the original like legal documents of like why the company was sued, which were released, that like one of the reasons they state is that like the little lightning bolt pattern that Kadabra has on his belly, they said it looked too much like the SS logo from World War II. So they were implying that Uri Geller. It's just baffling, the whole thing.
I will note, also, by the way, Alakazam, the evolvation of Kadabra, has 2 spoons! and this Mega Evolution, which is like something you can do.
Yeah, take that, Yuri.
Pokemon, has like at least 4 spoons. Like, I can't believe that Kadabra's the one that he went after, not the one with more spoons.
It is, it's genuinely kind of a mystery. It's worth saying that neither Nintendo or the Pokemon Company have commented on Geller's claims. So they haven't said when it might be reprinted, or if it will be reprinted.
Finally, they can let Kadabra out of his case.
I'm just imagining a desperate Uri Geller, like, just sort of crying outside the Pokemon Center. Please, bring the kids back to Kadabra. They need him. Now more than ever.
This is... this was the suitcase just sealed with, like, for emergencies only, and it took to the end of 2020 for him to go, this is what the world needs.
This is time.
It's like, it's time,
In case of global pandemic, break Kadabra suitcase.
Just smashing the button, and there's a tiny Kadabra inside. Just putting a spoon in a thing. I don't know. In a lock. Yeah, spoon in a lock. To unlock it. Because of course he could form it into a key within. That's all we have on the news this week. So let's move on to some questions from the audience. If you've got a question for the Dicebreaker podcast, you can reach us at podcast@dicebreaker.com. You can find us on Twitter at John Dicebreaker. You can find us at Dicebreaker Dice. You can find us at Dicebreaker.com.
Email.
Wills, to save my embarrassment, would you like to read this one from Nathan, please?
Hello, Dicebreaker team.
Hello there.
Following on from the discussion on last week's podcast, which underrepresented components or periods of history and culture, with the appropriate level of oversight, inclusion, and development, would you like to see brought forward within a board game setting? Or, if there are some great ones out there that aren't already getting as much love as they should, which ones would you suggest? And we'll open the floor. Anyone got any particularly strong feelings about this subject?
I think, well, it's worth saying up front that obviously, we're not necessarily the best people, because I think part of it is just allowing, encouraging people from those cultures and backgrounds into the industry, which hasn't happened. And that's often where that stuff comes from, is you just won't think of it because you've never come across it in your own life. I think for what it's worth, I would love to see, I've said this before, I think, a game inspired by the Bollywood movie scene, because it's something I've never seen before, and my wife has introduced me to a number of Bollywood films, and I just think Bollywood films have such a distinct genre, and I think so much of it lends itself to an interesting game, because so much of it is often like two parties or two groups of people interacting in different ways and leading to some kind of they start off opposed and then by the end they've joined together. So I just think that a Bollywood board game of some kind, whether it's about the production of those films or set within kind of the universe and story of a Bollywood style setting, would be really fascinating.
I think, to reverse the question, I would like to see less board games about colonialism.
Yes.
Especially ones in which the colonists are the protagonists of the setting. But yeah, apart from that, I generally I think, as I was saying with the Black Orchestra stuff, I think even just viewing similar periods in a different lens is quite important, because oftentimes we do see history as either there was a country being founded because it had lots of money, or somebody was having a war, and history's a lot more diverse than that. And it would be nice to see some of the more sort of human stories come out of it, even just certain bits of history that we've only ever seen from one lens, and seeing it from the flip side would be a lot more interesting to me.
I know it started as a video game, but this War of Mine, which then became a board game, I think is a really interesting example of that as well, where it's very kind of personal and human, and feels very genuine to the experience of the Siege of Sarajevo. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
I would say, I'm fed up with board games that are about going over to South America. or going over to North America and setting up civilizations there, when you're feel like there could be a more nuanced take on this, but you can't be bothered to do that. So you're just going to take the mechanics you've got and stick a setting on it that you think's going to work. US war, I don't know, US founding or whatever. I would say, so back in my school days, as part of religious studies, we studied a part of history covering the Indus Valley civilization, which is basically it was a civilization that existed around the Indus Valley, which is in the northwestern regions of kind of South Asia. And it's considered to be the origins of Hinduism, basically, which is how it's connected to RS. And it was fascinating because it was essentially history lessons, but about the cultures itself and how they were built around, religion, and how that kind of has ties in with modern day Hinduism. And it's considered one of the most, for its time, modern essentially societies ever existed. They had waterways, they had stuff that we wouldn't think about considering when the civilization kind of existed. And I would love to play a board game about that. There's so many board games about city building and civilization building, things like that. I would love to see one on the Indus Valley civilization, because it's fascinating. because there's a lot of mystery behind it, especially about, you know, how the civilization kind of fell. And I would love to see a board game around that. I think it's fascinating. There you go.
All right, Emma, anything come to mind?
So one thing I found that's super like oversubscribed is just Lovecraftian stuff. I know that's not historically accurate, but there was a point where it was just absolutely everywhere, and I just became super desensitized to it, just because it's the same thing over and over again. One thing I would like to see, and I guess this is just a personal preference because I enjoy reading it, is stuff like mythology. So like European mythology is quite good. So like Norse mythology, for example, was quite interesting. And also extending that, like Hindu mythology is quite good. There's a lot of flavour and cultures you can take that and make it into a really interesting game, instead of just going, oh yeah, here's Greek, here's Roman, done. This feels like you could do more if you had a bit more research, but as we were saying before, it feels like they just don't have the right people involved to propel those ideas, which should happen at some point. Yeah, I would like to see some more like Norse mythology and, you know, Hindu mythology, because they're really, really interesting, and, you know, it will make people like more interested and learn more about these other cultures.
Yeah, for sure. I always think of Rising Sun when Come On put it out, and one of the Japanese deities in it was based on a Wikipedia page that someone had created as a joke for a New Zealand farmer, and it ended up, I think it was like a Kickstarter exclusive or a stretch goal or something, but this random New Zealand farmer ended up in the game as a Japanese deity because they'd created it as a prank, and it appeared that Come On had just basically scanned Wikipedia, gone, yeah, that seems cool, and stuck it in. But I think that's just like the industry at points in a microcosm. Is there's too much of that.
A lot of the time, like, I think that's a pretty good example of how when you have a game created about a culture by someone who is not from that culture, it is always just going to be window dressing to something that they're not really that interested in. And I think to have a game that is so intrinsically involved with something that is to you foreign means that you have a can't think of the word in my head now. You have like a help. Oh god, I've just the thesaurus part of my brain has just melted through
like
my eyes.
Assumptions or
no, a thing that you are supposed to do because it is right.
Oh, I see.
Obligation.
An obligation. Thank you very much, Meehan. An obligation to get someone involved in your process who is from that culture and knows what they're talking about.
I really don't think there's anything wrong with a designer going, I really want to make a game about this period, this part of the world, etc. But what they've got to do is that they've got to actually involve people along with the design process and name them who can actually consult and say, hey, this is what's going on with this, and this is how we do things sensitively. I think that's so important now. And like the thing is, like Eric Lang, who made Rising Sun, he's pretty excellent from what I've gathered, and he's genuinely passionate about Japanese mythology and culture. Same with Ankh and everything. So I don't think there's a lack of passion by any means. I think it's just not, you know, on a corporate sense, not getting people involved that can actually consult on, hey, this is what's appropriate, and this is, you know, what actually it's about and stuff. So yeah.
And of course that just gets more people into the industry in general, which is always a good thing. Like, just diversifying the industry is much needed. Thank you for your question, Nathan. Emma, would you like to read this one from Brian, please?
Yes. So, hi Dicebreaker team. Can you recommend some engine building games with a similar feel to Wingspan? I have played Scythe and Handara, both very different engine building games, and are enjoyable, especially Scythe. However, I really enjoyed the relaxed strategic play of Wingspan. Thanks. And that's Brian. I think for me,
these recommendation questions are always tricky, because you have to think off the top of your head.
So the two that come to my head are Terraforming Mars and Splendor. But Splendor's a bit...
Splendor,
yeah, Splendor's a bit old school. I'm not too sure they're the two that come to my head that I've played and really, really enjoyed.
Splendor's really lovely as well. Like it's a really like that you've got your weighted poker chips and it's all in like a nice package. It's very well presented. So if you've got people who are new to that genre, I think that would be a pretty good
More like
introduction
splendid. Yeah. The box is too big though. The box is too big.
It is too big.
Considering what's in there.
I think the other classics, if they've not come across them before, are things like Race for the Galaxy, Roll for the Galaxy. You know, they are favourites for a reason. They can take a bit of like Race for the Galaxy is a lot of wrapping your head around the iconography to begin with, where it's like there are 7 different symbols here and they do various different things. I guess I'm going to be checking this rules reference for the next 20 minutes. But once you've got into it, I think, you know, it moves really quickly. It's good fun. It is kind of engine building at its almost purest, where it's just a neck and neck race of I'm getting more points than you. And every turn you're doing more and more and more. So if you've not touched those before.
One of my favourite ones, which I've just remembered actually, is London by Martin Wallace, which is a really, really lovely game. And another really nice box with some really nice art in and stuff. But it is about building up London in that sort of period where everything was getting built at once. But it's got a sort of it's engine building, but with like a twist, because the twist is that, you know, you're getting lots of stuff and you're putting it together and you're combining it into nice things and you're getting lots of bits that give you set collection, all that kind of stuff. But the more things that you use, it's been a while since I've played this, I don't know if this is going to be completely accurate. More things that you use, the more sort of like pollution and poverty that you're likely to run into. So you get these kind of like abstract like cubes that you get added to your engine of like, yeah, you're building this really fast, but like, you know, you need to make the city accommodable so people can actually live in it. So you have to have this kind of like risk reward sort of balance between how much can I push this without accidentally screwing up my my score because everyone's really upset with me, basically, which is quite cool.
As a specific genre, I'm struggling to think of like set examples of engine building games. Like just going through my history of, okay, what have I played? Yeah, I mean, Wingspan's great, am I right? Am I right?
Can you recommend any games similar to Wingspan? Well, Wingspan's just really good. Just play that some more.
Yeah.
It is really good. It is great.
Like the Airy in Root are engine building.
Yeah, technically.
Just play the Airy in Root.
I think the area actually a really good version of engine building as well, because you see how it is punishing if you don't keep that engine going. So you either get good or you just get stomped by a bunch of cats and mice.
Get good.
That's kind of it, right? It's like if you don't plan ahead in the right way, you will find yourself quickly. It can be punishing.
You'll find yourself in the BIRDY boiler. That's what we call it.
BIRDY boiler.
Yeah, whenever we play Root and someone's playing as the Airy, if they mess up, they find themselves in the BIRDY boiler. Yeah.
I do think like the Uri are another example of like the types of engine building game I like, where it's not just how many points can you amass over a set period of time. It's also like, hey, build something that's really efficient, but be warned, there is like, you know, there is a big thing that you need to push against, and if you screw up, you know, your engine will explode. You know, it's the Skaven version of engine building. 10 out of 100 will probably blow up on your face when you use it, kind of thing.
All right, Meehan, would you like to read this one from Dino, please?
Dino's Bar and Grill.
I don't think it's that Dino. Fortunately.
We can't confirm that it's not that Dino.
Yeah.
I mean,
nobody ever said that Dino's Bar and Grill was fictional or not.
This person
from popular song "The Boys Are Back in Town."
This person who's spelled the name D-I-N-O. So.
Yeah, it says my name is pronounced Dino.
Right, that's enough of that particular argument. Let's actually read the question. Hi, Dicebreaker. After a long history of playing Monopoly with my overly competitive dad, my mum refuses to play any board games, period. However, the one board game that she still enjoys is playing Trivial Pursuit. So I wondered if you had any recommendation for good trivia general knowledge games. Thank you, Dino.
Is Mr. Lister? Is that the one that people usually point to?
Mr. Lister's quiz shootout.
Yeah, which has real bullet holes in it.
No way.
Very exciting. They shoot every game.
That's the game where you try and name lists, right? Is that Mr. Lister? That would be the clue.
Yeah.
But it's a fun one because it doesn't require specific knowledge. It can be like, what are the ingredients in a Big Mac? And it's like bun, lettuce, meat. And then you get into the kind of darker territory of like, is it relish or is it acid?
Chemicals?
One of my favourite ones actually that we played recently, which is kind of a mix between trivia and just like stress management, is that one by Scorpion Mask, Matt, that we did a playthrough of in the kitchen.
No, not Stay Cool.
Stay Cool, yeah.
Oh, it is Stay Cool.
Stay Cool is excellent.
Stay Cool. Stay Cool.
And for anyone who's not aware of it, Stay Cool is sorry, I've got Toto on me now. Stay Cool is a game in which you are being asked really basic trivia questions, like to the point where the question could be like, what colour is a fire truck or something like that. But you're being asked in two separate ways. One in which you are just answering the question out loud, but the second in which you have dice in front of you with letters on, and you need to assemble the words in front of you using the dice. So you would have to find the R letter on one side of the dice, the E and then the D, put them together to make the word red. The trick is you're doing both at the exact same time. And then every single round it gets more and more stressful, to the point where, like, first you do it and you've got a standard timer. The second time you do it and you've got a timer, but you need to tell the other player when to flip it, because if the timer runs out before you say flip, then your turn's over. The third round you're doing the same thing, but you can't see the timer. So you're answering two sets of questions whilst you're doing a manual dexterity thing and trying to figure out how long you've been answering questions every sort of 15 seconds or so. It's brilliant. It's stress-inducing, but that's kind of the point. It's a lot of fun.
Maybe something like, Scattergrees is fun and straightforward.
It's a classic.
I've got you got Linky as well, which I quite enjoy.
Linky's great.
Linky.
I love Linky.
And Codenames. Codenames might be a fun one as well. That's less general knowledge, but just a good guessing game as well.
All right.
There you go.
We've had a lot of recommend questions where it's just like, here you go.
Yeah. Wills, would you like to read this one from Alex, please?
Dear Dicebreaker team, it has been well established the understandable dislike from the team of plastic miniature tsunamis from certain Kickstarter board games. I don't mind a few miniatures in board games to scratch my hobby painting itch, but are there any games that you think have way too many ancillaries, miniatures or otherwise? Should meeples be extra and everything be cardboard tokens, or should all games have all the extras like the Scythe metal coins? Much love and keep safe, from Alex. So for anyone who's just tuned in, this is their first episode of the Dicebreaker podcast or any kind of Dicebreaker. One thing we bemoan constantly is Kickstarters that hit all their stretch goals and suddenly ship with 4 metric tons of plastic, which is I think is a growing issue where, as Kickstarter becomes the main sort of way that a lot of people get their game funded, and it's a really useful tool because it means that a lot of games that previously might not have had the publisher support, are able to go their own and make sure that they can actually, make money back on the project that they're doing. However, the way that you get a Kickstarter funded is by offering lots of cool incentives for people to back. And the more incentives you put in, the more stuff you end up with at the end, which maybe isn't necessarily a good addition. But yeah, there's a lot of examples of this. I think the most egregious one that I can remember is the Batman game, which was I think it was based on the Conan game.
Oh
yeah,
gosh,
I remember that,
God, the monolith thing that you talking about.
And oh my god, I've never seen more boxes in my entire life. I watched someone do a review of it and it was just like, I've had to, rent out a new apartment to hold all of the bits of this
got
game.
to the point where they put in the T-Rex from like a Batman comics are, and it's like it's just a T-Rex. Like nobody's like, oh yeah, my favorite Batman character, a T-Rex.
The giant penny.
Yeah, I think the most egregious examples of these is when they have miniatures for like all the characters, like all necessary characters in the game. So, for example, with Scythe, you have a miniature for every single faction, but that's like what five miniatures in the box, and then you also have miniatures for the mechs. Personally, I don't think the miniatures are necessary for the mechs, but what I'm saying here is when they have miniatures for like that entire faction of goblins or something, and they have a miniature for every single goblin in the faction, and they have like 10 different factions or something, that's when it starts getting ridiculous. Like, I don't mind it when they have miniatures for like, these are the important characters, these are the characters that you're going to be playing and stuff. It's when they also have miniatures for the enemy units, like, as well. You might as well be making a bloody miniatures game, like, a war game, like, because that's what it is now. Like, it's not a board game. Like, just have standees or tokens. Like,
even with Scythe, like, they're kind of like that sort of classic board game plastic miniature where it's like, it's just a piece of coloured plastic. It's not really like a...
Not a sculpture.
Yeah, it doesn't turn up on a sprue and you don't have to like glue together every part.
Yeah. Like, and
one trend I really hate recently is the clip-on coloured bases, because they don't want to put coloured plastic in so that you can paint it. It's like, yeah, that's cool, but like I don't think I've ever painted a board game. Like, I'll buy miniatures that were custom designed to paint rather than add-ons to a board game, and it just means that I can't really tell who's who very easily.
Yeah.
Sorry, Meehan, I interrupted you there.
I was just say, like, even again in Scythe, like you have little units, like your soldiers. They're just like little tokens. That's fine. Like, we don't need to have miniatures for those as well. But there are games where they all do that. And then I'm like, well, this is why your Kickstarter costs like 200 quid. Like, and obviously people are backing these things, so they want them. But I just feel like they want them because it's part of that culture of like, I want the giant box full of like the Descent's Legends of the Dark. Like, when I saw how much that cost, like, I actually had a little mini heart attack. Like, like it's horrendous. And obviously that has 3D terrain pieces as well, which, yeah, okay. But like, it's those examples that I'm like, okay, no, this isn't really necessary, is it? You're kind of just doing this because people are willing to pay for this.
I'm going to pluck a number out of the air. No more than 5 pre-painted, no more than 10 unpainted in a board game. Done. Sorted it.
Simple.
I've solved the problem.
Easy.
Yeah, there we go.
Put
Yeah.
a number on it. No worries, mate.
I mean, I'm a hypocrite because like my wife and I have purchased all the Mansions of Madness expansions and painted all of the miniatures in there. But I feel we're invested so much, and it's like a thematic, we are playing for the narrative and the immersion in the world. So many board games are not that. They are just, here's a load of soldiers on a board, or here's a load of like identical things.
Like I feel like it's the tone that you're trying to set with the game as well. Like, if you've got, I don't know, if you're making a basically a board game version of a war game kind of thing where you have got troops moving around, or if you've got like really important characters and like the characters are the main important part of your game and you want them to have a cool model to represent them, that's fine. However, if you're making like a worker placement game and at no point you do any combat or anything like that, and you've got like 200 soldier models, it's like, why? Why are these here?
Chuck them out. Chuck them out. Or
There you go.
or you've got Betrayal, where the minions look like they've been
So
melted.
bad.
They're all doing the limbo.
Sculpt again. I kind of like it about that, to be honest. I like that. I think it matches the kind of trashy tone of that game.
That's the exact kind of stuff that you would love from a board game, though, Meehan.
Yeah, no, I love that.
Oh dear. But there you go. That's our opinion on Kickstarters. There's certainly... I mean, we did a preview for a game that I actually really liked, which was the was it just called Great Wall?
The Great,
Something like
yeah,
that?
Great
It was
Wall, the Great Wall. I think that was
the Great Wall, something like
Is
that.
that Mythic Games? Mythic Games is
Yeah.
another major offender in that regard.
Yeah, it's a really nice game. I really enjoyed it. And like it took me a long time to enjoy it because when we unpacked it, and obviously it was a prototype, so we were just getting like a sort of preview. We didn't do a review. We just sort of like showed how the game works. But we got like 3 separate boxes, a huge neoprene mat, like 4 different colors of like 100 different troops, and they were like nice sculpts and stuff. But it was like, lads, what is this game? Like, am I playing Warhammer? Because if I am, that's fine. I get it. But if I'm playing a worker placement game, I don't understand why these are here. Oh god.
Any thoughts,
Yeah,
Emma?
I just
or-
miss the little risk images. You know?
Yeah, I have to agree, and it's painful for me to say this because one of my favourite tabletop games suffers from this, and that's Kingdom Death. Kingdom Death has an obscenely
Kingdom
amount
Death
of
has a
models, and
lot
it
of
doesn't
models.
need them. And I remember getting the Kickstarter because I really enjoyed the game, and I got like 4 boxes full of miniatures, and 3/4 of them I'm just not going to use at all. And it's just such a waste of packaging, plastic. Like from an environmental perspective, it's just so bad. But the game's great.
And 2/4 of them are heaving breasts.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah, and then you have all the expansions that come out, which also have an obscene amount of models, and it's just like, please stop. I'll play Warhammer if I want loads of models.
Leave me alone.
Leave me alone.
Yeah.
I only have so much room.
I think that's at least one nice thing with the Warhammer board games that they put out, or at least they come with kind of standard Warhammer miniatures. So it's like, okay, I can use these in an actual game of
Yeah.
Warhammer.
Yeah,
But
and I think that's a smart business decision.
Yeah,
for
of
Games
course,
Workshop, because
yeah.
it's like, hey, you've already got the miniatures, why not give it a go? But it's also like, you know, most of the games they make are also still stick to that kind of theme of like, you know, dungeon crawly stuff and like, you know, stuff like Underworlds, where it's like, yeah, it's a card game, but you're moving soldiers around on hexes, so like, you might as well have little miniatures for them and stuff because we already make them. So like, a lot of the time they're not really much of a big offender because most of the games they're making are the kind of ones where you would understand having big hero figures on there. If Games Workshop brought out a set collecting like, you know, Sushi Go clone, but you were grabbing Necrons, then I'd be a little bit annoyed. But yeah,
I don't want to see it. The
yeah,
curiosity.
I mean, I'll be up for it.
One final note on this. I've just got to put that out there. Publishers, look into my eyes, please. Right. Please stop on your Kickstarter descriptions. Please stop putting like so many images of miniatures before you even explain what you do in the game. Please stop doing that. Just give me a grounding of what you do in the game, and then you can put all the pictures of the miniatures in there. Just like
Well, that's kind of a good example of like one of the problems
Yeah.
is like some of it's consumer face. So it's like some people. In fact, I'm sure a lot of people who back the Batman board game just want to just paint some Batman miniatures. I don't think they actually really play the game all that much.
it's just
which,
like the game is
yeah,
like
it's kind of a vicious cycle.
yeah, play second fiddle to all these miniatures. Oh, anyway, carry on.
yeah,
Had to get that off my chest.
we're not moving too far away because the last question we've got this week is from James, and it says, "What's your favourite or best mini you've painted? What would you like to paint but are too intimidated?" Mine is Mortarion. I put it off for ages before jumping in.
Mortarion's a nice model.
Mortarion.
Mortarion's the big plague angel. Right?
Yeah, it's the Primarch of the Death Guard. He's like a ridiculously big model.
Oh, Emma, you might as well start. The
So I can kind of relate because I have a pile of shame of stuff of like characters that are just too nervous to start in case I mess them up because, you know, they are a lot of money and you want to, you know, not lose out on money. I think the best model I've painted was about 3-4 months ago when I painted a little Death Guard icon bearer. So he's just got like a little flag, and I was just really happy with it because I came back into Warhammer after like 6 years hiatus just because Magic kind of took over. And but yeah, that's one I'm pretty happy to, you know, that was a good one to paint. How about you guys?
I've actually kind of leaned towards painting mainly like big showpiece models, because I actually tend to find that I get way more sort of browbeaten and like, oh god, I don't want to, when there's like hundreds of models than I do when there's a big one that I can just spend a long time on. So I recently did, which I've shown on a couple of our painting streams, was the Frost Lord on a stone horn from the Beastclaw Raiders in Age of Sigmar, which is basically a big woolly mammoth thing with huge horns and a dude riding along on it. And that was, I'm quite proud of that one. But I think the best one I've ever painted is that oh god, what's it called? Why is everything in Warhammer have such a complicated name?
Is it a dragon thing? Was it the dragon thing?
No, it was my giant rat thing, Skaven.
That will narrow it down with the Skaven. Yeah,
it wasn't the big demon thing.
Yes,
it was the big demon thing. Okay,
I can't remember what his name is. Anyway, I painted a giant. It's basically the Great Horned Rat, sort of like Primarch kind of. You know, I'm a big envisionment of him, but it's essentially like a giant rat demon. And I think that was the first, maybe the second time that I properly did a big model, and that was when I realized, like, oh, I much prefer this because instead of like slaving away on like this tiny little thing and like your hands are cramping up, you can just spend ages like, yeah, sure, I only did a sword today, but it looks great.
Yeah, I had a similar thing. I'm not a great painter, but I bought some Infinity models because I was getting into Infinity with friends, and I decided it's a small skirmish game, so it's only kind of a handful of figures, and I was like, I'm going to spend a long time on each of these, and I've painted up one of the JSA, can't remember what it's called, it's kind of a mech samurai robot thing.
Oh, your Neon Genesis robot.
Yeah, so I painted it.
I'm interested.
I painted it in the Neon Genesis Evangelion colours, the very distinct green and purple.
Excellent. Nice one.
I combined paints to get the specific colour. I was like, it's gonna look like that. But it was also one of those ones where often when we're doing Mansions of Madness figures, like they're relatively quick, you just kind of, they're just giving the effect because you're not looking at them up close. But I took a long time over it, kind of did multiple layers and washes and highlights, and was really happy with it in the end. It's, I'm not going to win any painting competitions, but it was just that satisfaction of like, oh, I spent time on this and like I'm happy with it for me. So that was just a nice kind of thing. I haven't painted anything big in a long time, but I would kind of like to.
Yeah, I need to paint more because essentially it requires patience, which is something I don't have. And it also requires that you accept if you've messed up, that you either go back and fix it or you just carry on. And if I've ever messed up anything, I just kind of want to throw it in the bin. So, like, I do want to do some more painting, but I think the best thing I painted was one of the first things I painted, which was a little bear.
Here's one you prepared earlier.
Here's one we prepared earlier.
Yeah, it's from a collection of miniatures for Critical Role that someone gave me. And it's just a bear, and I'm just happy with it because like the shading on the armor is really nice, and I've done some of the details, and you know what? Like when I look at that, I'm like, I can do stuff like that, and it doesn't look like total garbage. So
it doesn't look like a betrayal model.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a betrayal model.
That's the aim. That's the bar to cross. It's not doing the limbo.
If you wanna really make it something that you'll really enjoy, you now have to put it in the microwave for 10 minutes.
Yeah. That betrayal look.
Smoking bear coming out of the microwave.
We don't have a microwave, so this isn't going to be an issue.
Just flambe it. Just get get an aerosol can and a lighter. You're sorted. Flambéed bear.
Dicebreaker does not endorse. Aerosol can.
Dicebreaker does not endorse the following advice.
But that is all the questions we have time for this week. Thank you for sending in your questions. If you'd like to send us an email, you can do so at podcast@dicebreaker.com. Before we leave you, Wheels, representative of the video team this week. What's coming up on youtube.com/dicebreaker?
Well, Matt, it might have been said last week, but we had to postpone it to this week. My list of the best family games is coming up on youtube.com/dicebreaker. the premier YouTube channel for all board game content, of course. But including that, we've also got the, of course, next Dungeon Breaker episode coming up on Saturday. If you're watching this on Friday, then yesterday we would have done a live stream as well. I don't know what we're playing yet, but we're going to be playing a board game. Yeah, all sorts of fun stuff coming up.
Fantastic. On Dicebreaker.com, you can find a list of upcoming board games for 2021 from one Alex Meehan. You can find Jason Coles' thought on Commander Legends, which Emma was chatting about earlier. You can find Chase spoke to some of the creators of the upcoming RPG Blackbirds, which sounds like it has quite an amount of talent behind it, and is based on Zweihander, and that's coming up next year. And you'll be able to find the usual recommendations, Christmas gift guides, all of that kind of thing. Of course, you can also find new Dungeon Breaker merch on dicebreaker.myshopify.com.
I can hold it up, Matt. You can't see it, but someone on YouTube might.
Meehan's beat you to it, I think.
Yeah.
God damn it.
There we go. Yes, a new t-shirt, a new poster, and some new stickers, which I'm very excited about. I have not received mine yet, so I'm only a tiny bit sour. But we will, of course, be back next Friday with the Dicebreaker podcast. But thank you so much for joining us, Emma Partlow. Where can people find you? What's coming up on your side of things?
Oh, God. So thank you for having me. It's been an absolute delight. You can find me on Twitter at Emzyne, so that's EMMMZYNE. I write for TCG Player, which is a Magic the Gathering retailer, and my articles go out every Tuesday. So I talk about Magic on a budget, so how to get into the eternal formats like Modern and Pioneer on the cheap. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm hoping to do some Warhammer stuff for you guys soon. So
yeah, I'm very excited for this. Yeah, and your Magic on a budget, Modern on a budget, articles. As we've clearly proved this episode, as a team that knows very little about Magic, they're fantastic. Like I can read through them and go, I understand all of this. Like this makes me excited for Magic. So yeah, absolutely go check them out.
Thank you.
But yeah, thank you so much for being here, and also the rest, Alex, Meehan, cheers.
Yeah, just put me back in the cupboard, it's fine. I'll eat my gruel like a good urchin.
Gruel?
Tell us about your scythe game next week.
Where are you getting gruel from? Wheels. Wheels, thank you for being here.
That's good. No worries.
So we're just going to leave it like cheers, yeah. Signing off, yeah, bye. Of course, I've been Matt Jarvis. Thank you.
Some say it's my job.
Thank you so much for listening. Thank you again, Emma. We'll be back next Friday. But until then, take care out there. Stay safe. Don't play board games over Christmas. Look after your loved ones. And have a lovely day. Bye.